5 more minutes? Would you like us to wait for 5 more minutes for more participants to join in, please?
Yeah, no problem, Akshay.
Thank you, ma'am. Shruti ma'am, thank you for doing this session today. I believe that we waited quite long. So could you please start? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Akshay. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this session. A big thank you to SCPC for organizing this. I think it's perfect that we're doing it on a Friday. gives everyone the opportunity to really mull over the guidelines that we'll be presenting today. Think about possible routes for your project that you might want to apply via the desk, and then come to us with many more questions on Monday. Before we start, I'd like to introduce the India Cine Hub team. So we're a team of 6. We're based in Mumbai and in Delhi. So Delhi is a team of 4, which is Leena, who's on the call today, Ram, and 2 more team members. One person who handles who leads IT and product for us, and Devansh, who supports Alina with all the permissions for all the projects that come in. The team in Mumbai is me and my colleague Adra, and your final project disbursals and all the committee-led meetings happen out of Mumbai. So that's how the team is basically structured. What we'll be doing today is I'll be taking you through the incentives. So it's a 70-page policy document, which I know can be overwhelming to a lot of producers, especially if you don't come from a policy or a government-led background. It can be a little overwhelming. So our objective in the next 1 hour is to really simplify the incentives. What are the basic when you're applying for it, what are the basic things that you need to keep in mind, and what are the primary criteria that you need to consider when you're applying for a project. So I'll take you through all of that part, and Leena, who leads all the co-production related aspects for your project, will take you through what it takes for your project to be eligible for official co-production. What is it that you need to look out for, and how does it really benefit your project? That entire process is what Leena will take you through. So before wasting any more time, I'm just going to quickly take you through the presentation. I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, sure. It's visible.
Okay, great. So we are India Cine Hub. We were previously called the Film Facilitation Office. We are a desk under the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and our operations are handled by NFTC and Invest India. A big part of what we do is essentially execute the incentive scheme, which was announced by the ministry. So from marketing it to making sure your project, application is a smooth process to the final disbursal, all of that is essentially handled by India Cine Hub team. It's been just 1 second. Yes. So it's been a very exciting year for us. We're inching to 100 projects that have applied for incentives. Another 17 projects have received partial to complete funding. And a lot of learnings that we've had in the past 1 year, plus looking forward to a lot more projects to come going forward as well. So what we essentially do is when your project comes in from any sort of filming permission that you might require, to any sort of documentation that you might require from let's say a visa perspective, or getting your equipment in, all of that is handled by the desk. Like I mentioned earlier, the incentive management and disbursal is a big part of what we do. And then marketing and promoting the incentive policy is the third big vertical of the desk. How our incentives are split up is essentially into 2 big buckets. One is what we call incentives for foreign film production, and then there are incentives which are for official co-productions. Now, incentives for foreign film productions are further split up into animation projects and live projects, and it's the same with official co-productions, which is animation projects and service projects. But before we get into the buckets, what makes your project eligible or not, it's important to understand what are the kind of formats that your project is, project is eligible for incentives. Feature films, commercial TV shows and series, web shows and series are all eligible formats. Factors for you to consider here is the duration. So feature films have to be a minimum of 72 minutes in duration. Commercial TV shows and series have to be minimum of 30 minutes. I understand that the runtime might be 22 to 25 minutes and upwards. That's fine, but it's important for you to mention that at the time of application. Web shows, TV shows, series, animation series, all eligible. And how we consider them, being eligible for the incentives is per season is what we look at. The permitting authority for any of these kind of projects is the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and the application has to be routed via the India Cine Hub web portal. Documentaries are also eligible for incentives. That's the fourth category. Minimum of 30 minutes is the requirement in terms of duration. The only difference here is the permitting authority for documentaries becomes the Ministry of External Affairs. So the applicant needs to go to the nearest Indian mission, submit their script, and once you get a clearance from there, then you can come right back to us and apply for the incentives. What is not eligible, as it stands right now, is reality TV shows, is any kinds of ads, any sort of corporate fundraising films, any corporate films, any news shows currently are not eligible formats. This could change, but as it stands right now, it's TV shows, web series, and animation series and documentaries. Now diving straight in, like I mentioned, the first big bucket is the live shoots. Now, the fundamental requirement for any project that is applying for incentives to India Cine Hub, the requirement is that the funding for the project has to come from, outside of India, which means that in the case of a live project, the requirement is that the minimum qualifying spends for your project in India has to be a minimum of 3 crores or 30 million INR in India. And how we define the qualifying production expenditure, I'll get into it as well. So there are certain expenses for your project which are eligible and which are certain expenses which are not eligible. So for instance, any sort of expense that you incur towards travel, any sort of expenses that you incur towards legal expenses for your project, any sort of capital expenditure, all of these expenses are what we consider as not qualifying expenses. So when you submit a project for incentives, the first step that we do is we see your budget, and we look at what are the headers that are not eligible. We deduct all of those. And then finally, at the end of it, as per our calculation, if you hit a minimum of 30 million or 3 crores, then your project is eligible for the incentives. How the incentive calculation, rather the percentage that your project is eligible for is calculated, is eligible rather for a live project, is up to 40%. Now, how is this 40% split? One is the 30% you're eligible on the qualifying production expenditure. An additional 5% is eligible if you hire 15% or more Indian labor, which is your total crew hired on your project. And there's an additional 5% for what we call significant Indian content, which brings the total to a 40%. Now, the incentive cap per project, regardless of whether it's animation or a live project, is currently capped at 30 crores or 300 million per project. Now, the important question here is, how do we define significant Indian content? It's easy to show 15% Indian labor. You give us a proof of all the crew that you hired on the project, and I can quickly tick that and figure out, okay, if this is an eligible spend or not. But when it comes to significant Indian content, there is essentially 5 criteria that we look for in your project. And the first one is if 25% or more of your total budget for your film is spent in India, maybe one of the 3 leading characters of your project, including voice talent for animation projects, could be an Indian national. Maybe one of the creative heads of departments of your project is Indian. You present India in a positive light. You're showing, maybe the beauty of India. If your project is eligible under any one of these criteria, then automatically you're eligible for the additional 5% as well. Important thing for you to remember here is this is something that you need to apply, rather tick at the time of application, where you as an applicant can think, can take a decision for your project saying, I believe that my project is being filmed in XYZ locations, and it's genuinely shows the beauty of India, and therefore I believe that I'm eligible to these. What we do at the time of disbursals, we have a special committee that evaluates your project. We decide, okay, basis what you had selected at the time of application, is your project still eligible? And if the committee decides that it is, then you're automatically eligible for that additional 5% as well. And you have to be eligible under just any one category. It's not required that it has to be all 5. Coming to the second bucket, which is animation and post-production projects. Now, with live projects, like I mentioned, there's a requirement for a minimum qualifying spend of 3 crores to be spent in India. For animation projects, that requirement is 10 million in India, which is roughly 1 crore. The reimbursement eligible for you for your project, unlike 40% on live projects, is now 35% in animation projects. How it's split is 30% on the qualifying production expenditure and additional 5% for the significant Indian content. Now, the reason for this is the minute it's an animation project, the understanding is most of the labor will automatically be from India. Most of your talent will be hired in India. And therefore, the 15% Indian labor is not something you're eligible to. So the total is 35%. The cap, like I mentioned, remains identical. The only difference, rather the big difference between the live projects and the animation projects is in a live project, before you apply for what we call an interim approval, your project has to get a shooting permission in India. So the process is you apply for shooting permission. Once you get that, you can then apply for an interim disbursal. For an interim approval. This is where you tell us what your budget of your project is. You submit all the documentation required for it. And post that, we give you an interim approval certificate. And once that is done, you finish filming your project. You come right back. Once your project is complete, you give us all your supporting bills. And then we look at, basis the supporting bills, is everything in order? And basis that, we essentially give you the funds right back. In an animation and post-production project, what we've done to really simplify the process is we've taken the need for you to apply for a permission. So you go straight to an interim approval process. So you don't need to apply for any sort of permissions. You come straight to us and you tell us what your spends in India are likely to be like. Basis that, we give you a certificate, and then you go ahead, finish your entire project, you give your supporting bills, and we essentially reimburse the money back to you. How we calculate the qualifying production expenditure for animation projects is that there's a 25% reduction on your cost for the software license cost that we deduct at the time of your application. So 75% of your contract value is what we consider as the basic QPE for your project. This is a question that I'm sure most of you will have in mind, is how do we look at what is qualifying production expenditure? For a live project, any expenses that you accumulate from the day of filming, from the time that we've granted you the approval, is what we consider as validity for your expenses. For animation projects, it's on the day of your submission of your form, rather your application online, is what we consider as period of validity for your project. Any expenses for a live project towards cast, crew, extras are all eligible, provided they're Indian citizens. If you have any related party transactions, it's very important for you to declare it to us at the time of disbursal. Now, qualifying production expenditure is subject to proof that the payment has incurred and has been discharged in full. And this is a very important point. Now, the reason for this is you should have incurred all the costs that you expected to incur on your project at the time of disbursal. That amount should have, essentially been gotten out of your account. Essentially, you should have made that payment. So for instance, with, let's say, production fees, and this is, since now we're 17 projects in terms of dispersal, a lot of learnings with, common mistakes that applicants make is that you apply for a project for disbursal and most of the times, like production service fees are paid in tranches. And at the time of submission, it's perhaps mentioned in your contract that, second tranche of your fee is going to be paid after you get the incentives, or maybe at a later stage, 4 months in, but you've already applied for incentives. In cases like this, if that payment has not been incurred, then automatically what happens is that significant chunk then tends to get deleted, because the requirement as per the guidelines is that the payment should have been incurred and discharged in full. So it's very important for you to keep this in mind. So we have a committee that essentially decides on each project basis the proof that you've submitted. So we look at the market rate. We may look at what the costs that you've quoted are to make sure that costs are within acceptable norms. And if there's anything that needs to be excluded, then it's at the committee time that we decide to then exclude them, and then we recalculate what could be eligible to you for your project. Inclusions and exclusions. It looks like a bit of a long list, but I promise you it's not. Any project that you've incurred towards, fees paid towards your line producer, line production services company, below the crew, below the line for your crew hired, any sort of prop set constructions, insurance, accommodation, costume styling, goods, food, all of these are eligible expenses. And essentially for your project, any expense that is incurred in India automatically becomes eligible for the incentives. The big cost, which I know, might be rather pinch a little bit for your project, is expenses which are incurred, for traveling, whether it's within India or any sort of flights costs for the project that you might have are all excluded. So any interstate, international costs, all of these are completely excluded. Any sort of capital expenditure excluded. Indian taxes not eligible, and any sort of capital expenditure that you might have on your project are currently not included for the purpose of incentives. At the time of application, and this is a conversation that I've kind of a lot of producers have brought this to us, is being a little fearful of the number of documentation that would be required of you for the purpose of application, and that deters a lot of producers from looking at the incentives for their project, because the automatic assumption is that it's going to be too long drawn a process, it's going to be too complicated, it's going to be too many documentation. It's just effort that I don't think I want to take. We've been part of the desk for 2 years, and like I mentioned, we're inching towards 100 projects. This couldn't be further from the truth. What we've done intentionally is to make sure that the application process from start to finish is extremely simple for the applicant. In fact, for the document checklist, whether it's for your interim approval or for your final documentation, we've kept it extremely simple. In fact, if you look at the interim approval documentation that we require, it's the application form, it's the script and storyboard, it's your registration certificate of your foreign partner, it's your self-attested PAN card and GST, it's your company registration certificate. All of these documentation you would have easily available with you. We don't require you to go out of your way to produce anything which requires you to create something from scratch. We don't expect you to go from pillar to post to get access to some documentation. So we've intentionally kept this process simple so that the applicant doesn't face any issues at the time of applying for interim approval. It's 11 documentations that we're looking for. The entire application, ever since we completely revamped our portal, is online. You can track your application. You can see where your application is at. You can see the number of days it's taking for each step. And once we get these 11 projects in, we ensure that we give you the interim approval within 21 working days. Now, these timelines is something that we are extremely proud of, and we work really hard to make sure that it comes to you within that time. So shooting permissions, we make sure that we process it within 21 working days, and that's a maximum time limit that we've given. We are working to make sure that we reduce that timeline significantly. So within 15 to 17 days is our average. So shooting permission is between 15 to 21 working days. Interim approval, another 21 working days is what we typically take. But the timeline that we are truly proud of, and this is something that we ensure we stick to, again, that a lot of this is also dependent on the applicant. So you need to make sure that you apply, you give us all the proof of all the expenses that you've incurred, is the final disbursal of your project. Now, a lot of the producers on this call perhaps has gone through the similar process with, other film commissions, uh, and you might know the timeline that it takes. With India Cine Hub, the disbursal is extremely quick, and we're perhaps the fastest. We make sure that you get your money back within 60 to 90 working days. The fastest that I have personally processed a project is a little over 30 days. And the only reason that was possible is because their documentation from the auditor, from the accountant was absolutely spot on. They had all the supporting bills that we required. They had their tally data was just impeccably maintained. There was, no cause for concern in any sort of, transactions that they had had. Their GSTs, their taxes that are due to be paid in India were, paid properly. They had proof for all of that. So if your documents that you're collecting for your project is in order, then there's nothing stopping us from making sure that we disburse our money to you as well in record time. 90 days is our upper limit, but typically within 10 to 15 days we do an initial check of your project. We get back to you saying with the missing documentation that's required. The faster you respond to us with proof, the faster it is for us to process it. For animation projects, a very important documentation that we require is a foreign inward remittance certificate. So once you have, all of these, which is again, the declaration formats are all available as part of our, guidelines. Bank account details, we need it specific to your project. We need your tally data. We need an auditor to have checked your project and sign off on your expenses. So if you have these in place, the disbursal as well becomes that much more easier and faster for us. The next big part of what we are doing and what the government, now the ministry is working very hard to make sure that we have a lot more projects coming in, is the official co-productions. So Lena and my team leads that. She's going to be your single POC for any sort of questions that you might have to do with how to apply for an official co-production. What are the steps involved? I'll let Lena take you through the countries that we have treaties with, what's the process, and most importantly, do's and don'ts. Over to you, Lena.
Thank you so much, Shruti, for taking us through this very, bulky document that we have prepared in a very simple way. So if I could request you to, yeah, thank you so much, so that I can share the presentation. My screen visible?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go straight into what official co-production is. Like many of us, we know that that an official co-production between two parties is something that is recognized by both the government of both the countries, basically. So the co-producers have to sign an agreement which is in accordance to the treaty that has been signed between the two countries. What is the advantages of having an official co-production? Yeah, all of us are aware, and especially these days when we are at present, we have about 31 official co-productions that we have already granted. The ability to pull in finances, and also share the associated financial risk that may arise is something which is very important for co-producers, and it's an advantage to enter into an official co-production. Also the status, also the fact that both the films, that the films receive national film status in both the countries is a very big advantage. And so therefore it can give you access to the partner government's incentives and subsidies, like you were eligible for the incentive scheme for official co-productions with India. You can be eligible for the incentives that the other countries offer. It also gives you a better access to the partners market and also a newer audience. And of course, it gives you an opportunity to build a footprint in the and the partner countries' cinema world. It gives you, in case of live shoot, it gives you access to the desired locations and also maybe a cheaper input because it will be treated as a local production in the partner country also. Of course, the cultural benefits and the opportunities that you learn from your co-producer is an added benefit. And also it gives you better access to specialized skills and talents. So having said that, at the moment, India has official co-production. One second, PPT seems to be stuck. Okay. At the moment, we have official co-production treaties actually with 17 countries, but the last one that we have with Colombia is yet to be ratified, so we have not mentioned it here. But once it is ratified by both the governments, then we can put it up on our list saying we have 17 countries. At the moment, we have it with 16 countries, which includes, countries from Europe, countries from, Asian countries, etc. So what are the important points that we have to remember when you enter into a co-production agreement with a partner is that in India, we have a one-step process of giving co-production status, which is in many countries like in France, UK, Canada, etc. They will give you a two-step agreement approval. So the first will be an interim approval, and once your project is finished, they will give you a final approval. However, in India, we give you a one step. So we do not accept a short form agreement or a MOU or a deal memo, etc. We need a complete agreement between the two parties, which is in accordance to all the clauses that are given in our in the agreement, the treaty agreement, and also the rules of procedure. So the rules of procedure, which is given as an annex A in the agreements, they have specifics like what all documents, extra documents you need to submit along with the agreement, like the proper financial division, the split contribution, basically the production schedule, the NOC that you take in case it is a biography, an NOC that is written, that is required from the personality or the family member of the personality, writer's agreement, etc. So all those need to be included as a part of your agreement with your partner. So, and like I said, the agreement is governed by the clauses given in the signed agreement and the rules of procedure. The agreement for us, for India, we need the agreement to be signed on a stamp paper of either of the co-produce countries. It could be from India or it could be from whichever country you are making your co-producer is from. And the filming, it's very important to remember that the financial contribution and the filming or the production contribution should be in proportion to your financial contribution. So if your so the split budget that you will submit along with your agreement will determine whether it is in proportion or not. Third party contribution is allowed in some agreements, but it should not be less than 10%. Yeah, but when you are doing a third party agreement, you should definitely consult with your co-producer and say, for example, we recognize only a bilateral agreement, which is we do not allow a third country to participate in the agreement. But if your partner country, say for example in Spain, they have an agreement with some other country and they don't allow that agreement for the audiovisual, then it can get cancelled. So it is very important to remember that you ask your co-producer partner to check with the other agreements that they have with other countries before entering into a third party contribution agreement. Yeah. So the applications that needs to be submitted to both the countries simultaneously by the respective co-producer, and the eligible formats are defined as per the signed treaties. For example, Korea, Brazil, etc. They allow most audiovisual work, which can include feature film, TV show series, animations, etc. However, France does not allow, TV shows and all, because there is a requirement that the project needs to be needs to be released first theatrically before it is shown on any other platform. Yeah. Yeah, that's, and how to apply? You apply on our website. One second, there seems to be something wrong with my PPT. Shruti, will you be able to share the incentives bit? I don't know, it's not moving.
Yeah, of
forward.
course. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
Tina, can you, yeah, I just. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Shruti. So for the incentives for the official co-production, the reimbursement is up to 30% of the qualifying co-production expenditure. There is no minimum spends because it is a co-production, because financial contribution will be made from both countries. However, like in other foreign projects, it is capped at 300 million, which is 30 crores per project. So what is, it's one of the major advantages of the incentive scheme for official co-production, that it allows you for a 50% interim disbursal once 50% of your India spent is it's exhausted. So you can apply for a 50% interim disbursal with all the, and the process remains the same that Shruti had taken you through. You apply for the interim once you get your the interim approval, once you get the co-production status letter from both the countries. And then once your 50% shoot is done, you can apply for the interim disbursal. And 100% payment is given once the final approval and NOC, if required. The NOC, as Shruti told you, is basically there are some projects where the script evaluation officer may mention that it requires an NOC from the government official, so that, and for documentaries, it is mandatorily required that an NOC is submitted from the government, from the embassies of India. Sorry, an NOC is submitted from the respective embassies of India. Yeah. So, and like we mentioned, India has co-production treaties with 16 countries. Yeah, this is roughly like along with the other incentives that we have with the central incentives, you can also combine the filming incentives by states that the states offer. So there are, I mean, it's of various, quantum, and it can go up to I mean, from Madhya Pradesh, it goes up to 10 crores. So and these are incentives that you can combine along with our incentives, apart from, certain states like Gujarat, which do not allow you to combine the incentive. Shruti, is there anything you would like to add, please?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's broadly it. Gujarat, and I think Jammu also doesn't allow you to combine it. So this is, I mean, pretty much it. There's of course a lot more details in the incentive guidelines. The reason why we do this is also because now when you go through the guidelines, it'll all sort of fall into place and it'll all start, making a lot more sense. So that's our email ID, ich@NFDC India. We will also share the detailed incentive guidelines. As much as I would love to simplify the process, further for you, there is just no shortcut. You have to go through it. And the reason for that is, things like timelines, for instance, or from an application perspective, it's very important to have your internal auditor, maybe your legal counterpart, and your producer, all three of you to go through it. So the kind of questions that come your way will be very different. So go through the incentive guidelines in detail and then write to us if you have any further questions. We're happy to schedule meetings as well with you to take you further through the guidelines. And we hope to see a lot more projects and applications come our way. So that's it from us. We'd love to answer any questions that you might have. So over to you, Akshi.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, Shruti ma'am. Thank you, Leena ma'am, for doing this today. I'll request my colleague Deepak to kindly coordinate for the question answer round. I believe some of them have been asking questions through the Q&A portal. So any questions, please, you can raise your hands one by one. And Deepak, can you please coordinate? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Akshi. And it has been a very insightful session. Thank you, Ms. Shruti and Ms. Leena. Now we will go for the question answer session, and I would request our audience to raise their hands if they have any question, and we will wait for that.
Yeah, hi. Anand Pandey here. Am I audible?
Yes, Anand.
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah, hi Shruti, hi Leena, hi everyone. It's amazing work since the last time we had a discussion, and I am
Yeah.
very thrilled to see a lot of new information being added. My question is regarding the copyright. If you have covered it in the today's discussion, I'm not sure. I must have missed it. But the question remains, like if I'm a creator of my own content, and if some international investor, like let's say from a UK, would like to invest in my content and want to fund it. So, do I have to transfer the content to his to his ownership to be qualified for all these incentives, or just enough? It is enough for him to invest from the other country, the countries from where we have all the tie-ups. Good enough for him to just invest from there, and I can continue to have the content being developed in India using all the all the incentives which are giving to us. Will that be possible?
Anand, in case of a foreign project, the requirement as per the guidelines is the contract is between the rights holder and the service partner in India. In case it's an official co-production, then the rights can be basis your financial contribution between you and your international co-producer.
Okay, I just a little bit more I would like to elaborate because two, three things are contradictory over here. You want to promote the Indianness, Indian elements into the show, but you are not letting the copyright stay with the Indian company. Copyright is a very simple thing. It has got nothing to do with anything else. The content is usually developed by India if it is supposed to be for the Indian audience, also for the global audience. I think this is a simple thing which you can incorporate, which you can take it back to the ministry or your like superiors, and omit the omit this binding of the content to be coming from international only. It can be from anywhere. Investment is something which is more important to come from outside, right? That's what we are aiming for.
Point noted, Anand. Why don't you send us an email?
I would love to actually. Thank you so much. I'll definitely.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. But do explore co-productions as well, Anand, because that's something that we'd love for you to do more of. Come to a film bazaar. We're happy to introduce you to other co-producers as well. Maybe explore other projects that you can do with a producer together. I mean, we can reach out to Leena as well, and she can take you through the process if you have any further questions. So if that's rather a route that you'd like to explore, we'd love to see more of that as well.
This
But
will
on our first point, point noted, do send us an email and we'll see what we can do.
great. This will definitely because I can see a lot of improvements. So I can see it's going in the right direction. Definitely I will.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
I think Pradeep has raised his hand.
Yeah, thank you, Anand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi. Hello.
Hi, Pradeep.
Mr. Pradeep,
Uh,
please unmute yourself.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good morning. So actually, my query is sorted. I had put it up the question in Q&A. So Leena ji answered my question. My question was basically on the treaty side, like if we have the treaty with Canada as well as Australia, so will India consider the co-production between three countries? So she answered that India will not recognize, matlab India will recognize only one country.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You can
So
have you can have an agreement which has, like I mentioned, it can have a third party contributor, but we will only recognize two countries, either the majority country, whichever one you want. Say, for example, when you are submitting the application, if you mention it's an Indo-Australian co-production, we will look at Indo-Australia and then Canada as the third party
So
contributor.
in our case, actually, IP is owned by us, and the animation and the most production part will be done by us here in India, and most probably the post-production part and the scripting part will go to the other countries.
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Dharma.
Yeah.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Good evening, good morning, everybody, and thank you for SCPC to organize such a important seminar. I would like to know, is it an RCMC of NCPC is mandatory for this application process? Is it necessary that we have to be a member of SCPC?
I'll just answer that. Ma'am, sir, actually it's not. RCMC is only limited to SCPC. But then this is altogether about the incentives that are being offered by Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. So they both are not related.
Okay. Now, what is the role of SCPC in this? The entire. Is there any process that is to be done by SCPC? Any recommendation? Any kind of a support needed for this documentation from SCPC specifically to have the application approved by the ministry?
No, sir, not again. So altogether, the entire incentives work will be done by India Cine Hub. That's why Shruti ma'am and Leena ma'am are joined us today for that. And entire application work will be done by their team only.
Okay, just one more question. With regard to these treaties, legal treaties, these are legal treaties between two countries for co-protection. How the jurisdiction of these treaties, is it all these disputes will be resolved according to the Indian laws or the foreign laws, and which court will decide the final of the legal? It will be decided actually if in case of any legal dispute, according to which jurisdiction can somebody throw a light on that?
It's according to the majority country jurisdiction. Say, for example, if India is the majority contributor, then India will be, it will be according to our laws and laws of the land and vice versa.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has any other questions. Okay. Actually, what we'll do is we'll share the presentation with you.
Yes.
We'll share the incentive guidelines as well. And there's a, Excel sheet snapshot of of the incentives, which is again a simplified version of the incentives. We'll share all three, details with you, and you could share it with all the participants. Our email ID is there as well. So if there are any further questions, happy to answer them. Yes, Shrikant, I think, has a question. Yes, Shrikant.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I was just saying I was a little sick, and I really joined just literally about 5 minutes back when the questions were happening. Is it possible for you to share the recording of this meeting for the benefit? Shruti, is it okay?
I will.
I think it sounds like the answer is a no.
No. I think Akshay, SCPC team would have to answer that.
Yes, ma'am. So this session, yes, Srikanth, is being recorded, and with their due permission, we'll upload it on YouTube handle also.
Oh, okay. So I get to see this meeting, I guess.
Of course.
I'm really sorry to all of you guys. I'm sure you've been having a conversation since the last 1 hour. I had one question about all this collaborative measures. I'm 100% sure most of the things were answered. But one point is, when we're doing these bilateral, projects with any of these countries, right? Can we engage with more than one bilateral country? Just a question.
That was the last answer that we gave, probably
Oh,
right before you joined. But
oh,
yeah,
fantastic.
you can have, you can have multiple, but co-producers, but we will recognize only one because for us, it's a bilateral agreement. So we will recognize, say, even if you have, if it's co-production between India, France, and Canada, we will recognize with one country and not both.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Yeah, I think I'll wait for that video, and sorry to trouble you guys. I'm very sorry.
No problem. You can reach out to us if you have any
Yeah.
further queries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She can head over to India Cine Hub, our website.
Uh-huh.
Head to our website. Our incentive guidelines are there. It'll just give you a sense of what we do as a desk. Go through the guidelines, and then if you have any further questions, our email ID is there as well, so you can reach out to us at any time.
Shruti, to be very honest with you, the only one question one question that I had, because I downloaded all the treaties and I was like really looking at each of them quite close. So the only question is, it says 35% of incentive, and it also mentions tax. My question is, are you giving us a grant or are you giving us a tax rebate?
We are giving you a cash back for your project incentives.
Okay, and plus we get the remittance on the GST and GST, correct?
No. GST is not included. It's an exclusion.
Yeah. Okay, because it's a foreign service base. Okay, got it.
Also, it's 30% for an official co-production. If it's a live project, it's up to 40%. But both are capped at 30 crores per project.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Right, great. No worries. I think thanks so much again. Thanks
No
for considering
problem.
my questions.
No problem at all.
Ma'am, I believe the session now comes to an end. Thank you so much for answering and taking on time, today. If I may request, we can have few more sessions. Some people have not been able to join us today also, and some have been joining us late. So if we could have sessions more like these, I'll request you for that, your time and efforts.
Happy to at any time. You let us know. And maybe we can just one day just do a Q&A session. How about that?
We'll definitely be happy to organize that, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Done. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining us
Akshay.
today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Leena ma'am. Thank you, Shruti ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.